Welcome to this first of 5 videos on the reproductive system. And if you haven't taken the time yet to subscribe, put me on pause and do so. There now. As you can tell in the first video here, we're going to be looking at the male reproductive system. One of the ways to look at it before we get into the structures of the male system is to think about the reproductive system of both males and females as embryos. Let me just sketch something here and show you. If you think of this as a torso, and here's the legs, both males and females' reproductive systems start out completely homologous. Those two dots represent what will become the gonads. So for the males, those will become the testes, which are located externally. They're also the location of the ovaries in females. And they're both connected to the outside by a tube. Completely homologous. The difference is obviously that in males, the system changes completely. In females, it changes a lot, but the gonads remain internal. Those differences are known to be a result of genetics. Females are XX and males are XY, the names of the alleles. And the difference in gene expression allow the different migrations of their gonads. Anyway, let's have a look at the male system and see what we've got. This is a bilateral view, a sagittal view cut through the body this way, side view. The leg, if I were to draw a leg, it would be down here, looking at it from the side. This opening here is the anus. This is the scrotum. I'll just label these things and then we can talk about them in a minute. The scrotum holds the testis. This is just one testis, one of them. Testes would be plural. This darkened spot on the outside that I've colored in is the epididymis. The penis. The tube through the penis is the urethra. This penis, the way I've drawn it, is one that is not circumcised. During a circumcision, what doctors will do, it's a matter of family choice and sometimes religious practice, but what they will do is they will remove the foreskin, and I'll just draw the difference here, to expose the end of the penis like that. It's a personal preference on part of the family. So now I've drawn it, that's a circumcised penis. Urethra goes right to the end here. If we follow the urethra, the tube goes up to the bladder, urinary bladder. And of course, there'd be a tube from the top of the bladder to the kidney up there, obviously. That's the ureter, is urethra. Following this tube, you can see the urethra goes to the bottom of the bladder, but there's also a tube that comes around like this to the testis. And actually this goes to the epididymis. This tube here is the Vas Deferens, or it's also called the ductus deferens. Ductus or deferens or Vas Deferens, or sperm duct. And following it around, we have 3 glands. This one here is a seminal vesicle. This one here is a Cowper's gland, capital because it was a person's name. Also called the bulbourethral gland. And this one here that I colored in red is a prostate gland. So that's the male reproductive system. In the second video of this series, we'll get into the business of what goes on inside the male reproductive system once a person reaches sexual maturity. But for now, in this video, we're only dealing with primary sex characteristics. So the presence of a penis, the presence of a scrotum represents primary sex characteristics. Secondary sex characteristics don't kick in until puberty, and that's like I say, the story of the second video. But before we leave structures, I do want to take a look at this structure more closely. So if you'll allow me to take a quick second and represent that testis here. So this is a testis. This is the epididymis. This is the beginning of the Vas Deferens. Now I'd like to try and give you an indication of what's going on, what's the structure like inside of this testis. So let me just imagine taking that apart just a little bit. The Vas Deferens is a coiled tube down here. So it's a series of tubes that stretch out into the testis itself. So we have a whole pile of these tiny little tubes that originate in the testicle material, testicle tissue, and they collect up and form this epididymis. These tiny tubes here are called seminiferous tubules. The tissue in between them, I'll just use a different color for it here. The tissue in between them is all endocrine tissue. It's called the interstitial cells in here. Now the difference in what's going on here is that this testis is housed in the scrotum. I'll just draw the scrotum here. This is the location where sperm are produced. The business of the scrotum is very significant. The scrotum is basically it's just a skin tissue with connective tissue on the inside of it. Of course, there's blood vessels and nerve tissue in here as well. But the subcutaneous fat layer that we have all over our bodies is not in here. So this is very thin tissue here. The reason for it to be such a thin tissue is because of temperature. Sperm are produced in the seminiferous tubules, and they are produced at a temperature of about 34 degrees Celsius. Well, body temperature is closer to 37. So by the testes being outside of the body wall, then there's a slightly lower temperature, and the sperm are produced more correctly. One other thing I would like to go into just a little bit before we leave this topic for now is what a sperm looks like. Sperm aren't produced till after sexual maturity, but we should maybe just get into what they look like, because we're going to be taking the seminiferous tubules apart a little bit in the second video, and we won't have time for that consideration then. So a human sperm cell basically can look something like this. Where it has a head, a midpiece, and a tail, which is really just a flagellum. It's an axial filament. And the head is covered by a sort of gel-like mass covering. It's got chemicals in it, which we'll talk about coming up. It's called an acrosome. Inside the head is the DNA. Remember, these are produced by meiosis, so there's only 23 chromosomes in here. The midpiece is the location of mitochondria. And the mitochondria generate ATP. The ATP is the energy, chemical energy form that the tail uses, the filament of the flagellum uses in order to swim. So this swims and the sperm goes that way. So that sort of summarizes the structures of the male reproductive system, and we'll get into the function of it in the second video. But like I say, some of this detail there's no room for it in the second video. Thanks very much.